Before we jump into today's story, drop a quick comment to say hi. Tell me your name, where you're watching from, and let me know if you're sticking around till the end. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. Alright, let's get into the story. I should never have come here. That thought keeps circling through my head like a dying moth, burning itself again and again against the light it cannot escape. Every second I spend inside this house presses harder against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. If you're reading this, if somehow these words find you, please heed them. Don't ever step foot on Ashford Road. Don't ever follow the dead-end trail that leads to a property the locals don't talk about. Friends, you enjoy listening to stories, but you don't subscribe to the channel or like the videos. I request you to please subscribe to the channel right now so that I get more motivation to bring you even more stories. If you help me reach 1,000 subscribers, I promise to bring you extremely scary stories with a truly real feel. 2 horror stories every single day. So go ahead, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and now let's move on to today's story. I'm telling you this because I thought the stories were fun, just superstitions meant to scare kids on Halloween. But this house in upstate New York, a forgotten piece of land swallowed by the woods, is alive in its own way. It doesn't let you leave once you enter. And even now, as I jot down every unsettling detail before the scratching begins on my walls again, I can hear something moving just outside the door. You want the truth? Fine. Here it is. This is the story of how I lost myself inside the Hollow House. It began on an overcast afternoon, the kind of half-light that makes colors dull and air heavy. I was driving up from Buffalo toward the smaller townships, taking the back roads. The autumn air smelled like damp leaves and wood smoke. It should have been comforting, but the longer I drove into the forests lining the countryside, the quieter it became. Too quiet. My old Ford rattled over cracked pavement that eventually crumbled into dirt, steering me toward a place I hadn't exactly meant to find. But I did mean to, didn't I? My obsession had started online. Late-night forums, grainy photos no one could verify, whispered stories about the Hollow House, a place where squatters vanished, hikers disappeared, even county workers refused to enter. The details changed depending on who typed them, but one thing remained constant. If you stayed past nightfall, you either didn't come out or you weren't the same when you did. I should have laughed it off. Urban legends in rural America are a dime a dozen. But something inside me wanted to see it for myself. A morbid curiosity, like touching a wound you know will hurt. My GPS had long since stopped giving directions when I found the dead-end lane. There was no sign, no mailbox, not even the skeleton of a fence. Just a narrow path of dirt framed by trees leaning unnaturally inward, as if whispering to each other about my arrival. I killed the engine and sat there for a minute. The world outside the windshield felt stilled. No crickets, no rustle of squirrels, no wind through the branches. That silence pressed against me harder than any sound. Finally, I grabbed my backpack, the flashlight, and the camera I thought I would use to prove everyone wrong. Then, I stepped into the Hollow House's domain. It didn't look like much at first sight. just a sagging colonial-style home, maybe late 1800s, with gray wooden siding curling outward like old scabs. Most panes in the windows were cracked or missing. The porch leaned forward as though eager to collapse. But I swear, the second I looked up at it, the house was already looking back at me. You ever feel stared at when no one's around? That deep animal sense under your skin? That was my first welcome. The front steps groaned when I put weight on them. Beneath, the earth smelled wet, like meat gone bad. My flashlight beam fell across the entry door, a thing swollen thick with water damage, its paint long peeled into strange shapes. I pushed against it, expecting resistance. Instead, the door drifted inward with a hollow sigh, the kind of exhale an empty body might give. I told myself I was fine, that it was just an abandoned house, and abandoned houses are full of drafts, shifting boards, and rats, nothing more. But my gut knew better. Every step echoed, but not evenly. Sometimes the floorboards groaned where they shouldn't have, a room over or one step ahead. My flashlight beam illuminated water-stained wallpaper and dust-choked furniture left behind. Tables with half their legs splintered, a rocking chair with claw marks on the arms, picture frames holding nothing but faded paper where photographs should have been. Only the staircase looked intact. It rose upward into shadow, not broken or rotted like everything else. It seemed to expect me, daring me to climb. I think that's when I realized the house didn't just contain emptiness, it had rules. I kept hearing faint tapping from above me, like fingernails against wood. I told myself, rats again. And then the whispering started. Not actual words at first, more like the sound of wind threading through tiny cracks. But no wind moved. And the longer I stood in the foyer, the clearer it became. Patterns, breathing, a rhythm, not mine, not human. So I spoke, against my better judgment. Hello? The whispering stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. I knew I should leave, but here's the truth. When you stand in a place like this, you don't always feel fear the way you expect. You feel pulled. Like curiosity becomes a hook in your ribs, and the line is being reeled inside deeper and deeper. And so I climbed the stairs. The second floor was colder, though no windows had glass left to keep the air out. My flashlight beam revealed wallpaper hanging in strands, doors cracked open just enough to tempt me. Bedrooms, I assumed. Something moved at the end of the hallway, just a flicker of weight, like someone stepping back into a room too quickly. I froze. Anyone here? I called again. My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. Silence stretched. Dust spiraled under my light. And then, from inside the leftmost room, I heard it clearly. A low, wet laugh. Not a human laugh, something broken, as if bones could cough humor. The sound rippled through me, a primal reaction I couldn't control. I staggered backward, my shoes crunching old plaster on the floor. My light shook in my hand as I forced myself to look again at the doorway. It was wider now, not open, wider, like the wood had peeled back like flesh. The doorway yawned at the end of the hall, impossibly wider than it should have been, as though the wood had peeled back like flesh. My flashlight beam didn't catch it clearly,
almost like the dark inside the room resisted light. The laugh, wet and broken, was still echoing in the back of my skull. I don't know if it had really happened or if the house had only pressed it into my head from inside, but it left a mark, the kind of dread that makes your knees tremble even when you tell yourself nothing's there. I started moving backward, keeping my light fixed on that warped entrance, step by step, my pulse hammering against my throat. The floorboards under me creaked too loud, like they were reporting my movements to the walls. Then came a noise I can't explain. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't breathing. It was like something dragging itself backward across dry paper. Thin, whispering sounds, as if fingernails scraped hard on wallpaper, inch by inch, coming closer. I should have run. God knows I should have bolted back down the stairs, through the foyer, out the swollen front door, and back into my car. But curiosity is a cruel leash, and terror only winds it tighter. Some part of me wanted to see. So I aimed the flashlight deeper into that impossible doorway. The beam caught the corner of something. Not a shape I can properly define, more like folds, shadows on shadows. Too many angles bending outward where a body should be smooth. And then the light flared against 2 points far back in the dark, wide and unblinking. Eyes. They weren't animal eyes. They didn't shine like glass or glow yellow like deer in a headlamp. They absorbed the light, drank it, the pupils too wide, too hungry. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My throat locked as I stared. And then the laugh, or whatever was pretending to be one, rippled out again. That was enough. I bolted. My footsteps thundered down the stairs, every slam of my shoes matched by groans and cracks in the wood that didn't sound like me. The house seemed to collapse alive around me, each step forward making walls lean closer, as if trying to brace against my escape. I hit the foyer hard. My flashlight beam swung madly, slicing across walls that seemed different from before. The peeling paper had patterns now. Faces. Not sketched, not painted, but shapes pressed under the thin layers, noses and mouths pressed against the inside, warped in silent screams. The front door, my way out, was shut tight. I knew I hadn't closed it behind me. I remember leaving it yawning open, but now it was sealed, the wood flat against its frame like it had grown roots. I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. I pulled harder until my knuckles cracked. The thing didn't budge an inch. That's when something tickled the back of my neck. Cold. Not air. Not fingers either. Too fine. Too many. Like strands of hair brushing against skin when no one's around. I spun and swung my flashlight back toward the stairwell. Nothing. Just open dark. But the whisper had returned, louder this time. Shapes forming beneath it. Words, maybe. Enough for my mind to almost latch on. Stay. Stay. I staggered to the corner, pressing myself against rotting plaster, sucking in each gulp of stale air like it was my last. And then I realized the floor beneath me was warm. Not from sunlight, as if something large moved beneath the boards. Breathing. I flinched away, panicked, raising the flashlight. My beam caught the edge of the dining room to the right of the foyer. Its entryway hung open, a gaping rectangle of shadows. And I swear I saw someone standing there. She was only visible for a flicker, a second stretched too long. A woman, maybe mid-30s, hair hanging down to her shoulders in clumps, dress fraying at the seams. Her head drooped forward, eyes closed. Then, in the blink of an eye, her face snapped upward. Her eyes weren't fully eyes anymore. Black drowned them out, but thin spiderwebs of red veins stretched to the corners, twitching faintly as she locked on me. Her mouth opened slowly, bottom jaw rocking too far down, hanging longer than human bone allowed. A hiss rattled from her throat, not air, but water, like a drowning sound caught mid-gurgle. And then she stepped backward and disappeared into the dining room dark. I almost dropped the flashlight. My body wanted to crumple right there, but adrenaline doesn't let you. It made me move, stumble away, trip against the bottom stair. My flashlight beam swept wildly across the ground and caught something else. A photograph. It was curled and dirty, lying face up amid dust and plaster. I kneeled, shaking, and picked it up. The paper edges disintegrated against my fingers. The photo was black and white, or maybe it had lost all color with age. 5 figures stood in front of this very house, smiling stiffly at the camera. Parents with 3 children spaced beside them. But the faces were gone, not torn, not scratched out, blurred, as though the photo itself had melted the features, leaving only smears where eyes and lips should have been. Behind them, in the upstairs window, was a shape. It looked exactly like the thing I had seen in that too wide doorway. Just as I realized that, the whispering rose again, only this time not all around me. It was coming from the photograph. I flung it away. It slid across the warped wood floor and stilled in the dark corner. That's when the knocking began. Upstairs on the 2nd floor I had fled, sharp, deliberate knocks, like fists, pounding one by one against the doors I hadn't opened yet. Bang! 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 Every knock made the foundation tremble. Dust plumed from the plaster ceiling over my head. I didn't know where to look, which dark rectangle would spill open next. My flashlight beam quivered, shadows twitching inhuman shapes across the walls. And then, footsteps above, running, heavy, fast, chasing toward the stairwell. I ran without thinking, into the dining room, past where the woman had disappeared. My flashlight carved a path through dust and overturned chairs, cracked china scattered against the floor. The smell hit me instantly. Not dust, not mold, rot, wet and animal sweet, clinging at the back of my throat. I gagged and stumbled into the kitchen. Rusted appliances leaned against counters, the fridge door half off its hinges. A sink clogged with black water hissed quietly, though no faucet was on. And against the far wall stood a door leading downward. A basement. I did not want to go down there. Every instinct screamed to stay away, but behind me, the pounding footsteps thundered down the stairs. No choices left. I wrenched the basement door open and slipped inside. The smell of rot thickened, swallowing every breath. Stairs groaned as I descended into pitch darkness. The basement air was damp, chill. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied. And I realized the walls down here weren't stone or brick. They were different, covered in layers of plaster that curved oddly, like something had swelled beneath them. Something living. The stairs shuddered as each step I took. They felt soft in places, almost like wood swollen with blood instead of water. The smell thickened as I went, and it was no longer just rot. There was an undertone sharper, metallic, copper clinging to the back of my tongue. I didn't want to taste it, but I did. The basement floor came into view at the bottom of the steps, revealed by the narrow cone of my flashlight, except it wasn't a typical floor. It was soil. Black, damp earth stretched across the room, sinking slightly, as though it had been tilled recently. Roots dangled from the ceiling. No, not roots. Hair. Thin strands of it curling downward in clumps, each swaying though no air moved. I gagged and pressed the sleeve of my jacket against my nose, but the air filled my lungs anyway. The basement was wider than the house above should have allowed. My light sailed across its walls and I understood immediately none of it was right. The walls moved. Not in a rush, not quickly, but they pulsed. Every few seconds, the plaster swelled outward, then sank back, as though the house itself took slow breaths, in and out, in and out. I felt dizzy watching it. And then came the sound. At first I thought it was dripping water somewhere in the soil, sharp, fast plinking like drops striking metal. But no matter where I turned the light, the sound was everywhere, rising into a rhythm. It wasn't dripping, it was typing. The sound of an old typewriter, clacking away in the dark. I swung the flashlight desperately, searching for its source. And then, in the far corner of the soil floor, I saw a desk. It looked impossibly clean compared to the rest of the basement. A tidy wooden writing desk, polished as though it had been placed only yesterday. On top of it sat an ancient typewriter, the kind with rust-blackened keys and a roller for yellowed paper.
The keys struck themselves. No hands, no figure hunched over, just an unseen force hammering the letters one at a time, producing words line by line across half-rolled paper. I swallowed, throat dry as ash, and forced myself forward. With each step across the damp soil, my shoes sank half an inch, as though the ground wanted me to stay. Hair from the ceiling brushed my temple, sticking to sweat slicking my skin. By the time I reached the desk, my body was trembling. My flashlight jittered against the wood, illuminating the paper. Words spread across it in jagged black letters. "Why did you come here?" I jerked backward, my chest hammered. The typewriter stilled for only a second. Then the keys slammed down again, quick, insistent. New words clawed across the paper. "You were not invited." I reached out, God help me, I don't know why I did, to yank the sheet from the roller. My hand trembled as I brought it closer to my light. The paper stank of damp mold. More letters bled across its surface, as though etched beneath the skin of the page itself, twitching upward in black veins. "You will not leave." The words wavered, and beneath them I saw another layer. Not print, faces. The same blurred faces I had seen in the photograph upstairs, half-formed inside fibers of the paper, mouths open wide as though screaming silently through pulp. And then, my flashlight cut out. The dark fell like a lid clamped over me. Not total, something deeper. It pressed against my eyes, forced me to strain them open in vain panic. I heard my breath rasp loud in my ears, the soil beneath me shifting as though something crawled beneath its surface. Then, the whispering returned. Not distant this time, not in the walls. Right in my ear. "Still here." Fingertips brushed my shoulder. Not warm, not flesh, cold and papery, like dry leaves crumbling at first touch. I whipped around in blind panic, arms swinging wild, throat loosing a broken yell. Nothing. My flashlight sputtered back to life. My hands almost dropped it, because now I wasn't alone. Shapes dotted the soil floor. Dozens. No movement at first, standing still as though they had grown out of the earth like scarecrows. But as my light swept over them, I realized they were people. Not alive, not fully dead. Their skin was gray-green, tissues collapsing in loose folds, damp as though soaked too long in water. Their faces were blurred. Not mutilated, not scarred, blurred, just like the photograph, making them impossible to recognize. And yet, they leaned slightly toward me in unison,
every head cocked, silent, waiting. Sound built steadily from the walls, rising higher with every pulse of plaster. I realized it wasn't whispering anymore, or typing, or knocking. It was chanting, composed of many voices woven into one, all shivering against air not made for human sound. Stay, stay, stay. The figures began stepping forward. Feet dragged across soil, but no footprints followed. The hair dangling from the ceiling swayed against their heads like a grotesque veil. I backed away blindly, eyes shaking, but there was nowhere else to go. The stairs behind me stretched impossibly farther, every step retreating deeper into the dark no matter how high I tried to climb. The house was folding itself, changing, keeping me here. I screamed at them, voice cracking, "What do you want from me?" For a brief instant, the chant stopped, and every single figure raised its arm, bony gray fingers extended. They pointed toward the typewriter desk, toward the page still bleeding letters. My flashlight wavered across it, and I watched as new words formed with impossible speed. "Write. Finish our story." I don't know how long I stood frozen. My body wanted to collapse, to shut down entirely, yet my legs carried me back toward the desk, even as my head screamed not to go. It smelled stronger up close. Copper, mold, something acrid that made my throat burn. The typewriter clattered, keys striking without pause, waiting for me. "Sit down." The figures pressed closer, circling me. I felt their damp air against my neck, hands hovering inches from my shoulders, waiting until I obeyed. So I sat. My body almost buckled as I dropped into the chair. The wood was sticky under my hands. The typewriter's keys stopped moving. The roller clicked backward, and the final line printed, "Finish it yourself." The room fell into silence. Every blurred figure stilled. The basement air pressed in, my chest locking. I placed my trembling fingers on the typewriter keys. They were wet. When I pulled my hand away, black ink, or blood, coated my fingertips. That's when the machine whispered. Not through paper now, directly, through the keys, the typewriter groaning like wood alive. "We need your words." I panicked. I slammed my fists at it, screaming, wanting the whole damn basement to fall apart. The desk screeched, the figures stirred, and the soil beneath me buckled. It opened like a wound. The ground cracked in wide hooks, peeling downward. Beneath the thin crust of soil was nothing solid, just open void. A darkness spiraling too fast to be natural, pulling air, pulling me. The figure stepped closer, circling tighter, their arms stretching toward me, their blurred faces bent low as if to whisper, and one of them finally touched me.
It was a child, small, its limbs thin. When its hand grazed mine, something flashed through my head. I wasn't in the basement anymore. Not fully. I saw them. The family in the photograph, alive, laughing, running across the yard with the house standing tall behind them. Then night fell, and everything blurred, their smiles smeared, their movements distorted. The house folded around them. They never left. The vision snapped. I staggered, gasping, back into the soiled basement. But it wasn't soil anymore. It was wet flesh. Everywhere I stepped, it squelched, pores opened, warm, damp tissue pressed up between cracks of dirt. Roots hanging from the ceiling writhed like veins, and the figures leaned closer, whispering now not as one voice, but as many, overlapping, screeching through my skull. "Stay with us. right us, finish what began. I ran. For the second time, adrenaline overrode the pull. I sprinted toward the stairs that shouldn't have existed anymore. My flashlight clashed wildly, cut shadows across stretched walls. The blurred figures reached but never touched, their whispers fading into furious static rising behind me. When I forced myself onto the steps, the house collapsed, noise around me. Banging, shrill screaming in languages I couldn't understand. The wood groaned and stretched under my grip like muscle. Still, I ran up, panting, clawing my way back toward the foyer. By some violation of reason, I made it. The door no longer fused shut. It stood ajar, only by half an inch, as though mocking me. I threw myself at it. And on the other side was not daylight, just black. As though the world itself outside the house no longer existed. When I pulled the door wide, expecting at the very least the chill of night air, there was only absence. A gorge of ink where the world should have been. No ground, no trees, no stars. Just blackness that hummed low, a vibration deep in my sternum, like the hum of machinery behind walls too thick to see. I staggered backward, blinking, desperate for outlines of the woods, the road, my car, anything to remind me reality still existed outside this house. But even the porch was gone. Beyond the doorframe was nothing. I stretched my hand over the threshold. My skin vanished the instant it crossed, not swallowed, not hidden, simply erased. Where my arm should have continued, it ended, severed by the black. Not pain, not bleeding, just absence. As if everything beyond belonged not to me, but to something else entirely. Panic shrieked through me. I tore my hand back inside, collapsing against the foyer wall, clutching my chest as though to anchor myself to a body that might not be mine for long. The shadows in the corners quivered at my retreat. The smudged wallpaper faces seemed to exhale silently in unison. "You cannot leave." The whisper was new now. Not around, not layered, not many. Singular, clear, spoken in a voice that felt like it lived inside my sternum. And in that moment I understood the truth. The door wasn't an exit. It was a mouth. The black void loomed at my back. I couldn't stand near it, so I turned toward the stairwell again, breath sharp, legs trembling. The pounding from before had stopped. The house was quiet now, too quiet, as though it had gotten what it wanted. But what did it want? Every instinct told me the answer waited upstairs. Something about the upper floor tugged at me. I hadn't finished exploring what lay beyond the warped doorway, the widening hall, the broken laugh. And even though every fiber of me screamed against it, the pull was stronger. So I climbed. Each step up resisted. The wood stretched like taffy under my shoes, reluctant to let me rise. I forced myself onward, every creak sharper than bone-breaking. At the top, the corridor stretched longer than before, far longer. The doors lining its sides had multiplied. 10, 15, 20 black mouths yawning open, each one identical, each doorframe taller than the last, until the hall seemed an endless throat. And at its end, light, pale, flickering. Not the yellow warmth of a lamp, not the white glare of anything electric. This was the glow of rot, phosphorescent green-blue, the kind you see under stagnant ponds. An impossible urge dragged me forward. My flashlight beam darted door to door, searching for shapes ready to leap. But every door revealed only dark beyond, until I reached the light. The final doorway opened into what had once been a child's nursery. Paint peeled across walls, revealing shapes beneath. Hand-drawn stars, half-formed moons, the outlines of animals lost beneath mold. A crib leaned ruined against one corner, its bars snapped in half.
Stuffed toys lay gutted across the floor, their white innards scattered like bones.
The light wasn't from bulbs. Dozens of jars lined the wall shelves, filled with liquid green. Inside floated shapes, small, twitching things. At first, they looked like moths, but when I leaned closer, horror locked inside my throat. They weren't insects. They were fingers. Infant fingers, moving, flexing slightly, as though still alive, independent of the bodies they once belonged to. One jar cracked. A single finger slithered against the glass, pressing as if trying to claw its way free. I stumbled back against the crib, splintering its weak frame. The air pinched my nose, sour sweet, coppery again. And that's when I noticed the rocking chair in the far corner. It moved, ever so slightly, back and forth, though no one sat in it. I froze, breath trapped. Then, slowly, a figure faded into the chair's seat, like smoke condensing. A woman. Her features weren't blurred like the others. Her face was sharp, pale, drenched as though pulled from a river. Black hair caked into ropes trailing past her chest. Her lips were torn at the corners, stretched into a grin much too wide. She cradled nothing in her lap. Her arms rocked empty, back and forth, until her head cracked toward me. The smile twitched, and her voice entered my skull. "You brought the words." I staggered against jars, the liquid sloshing inside them. My tongue stuck in my throat. I couldn't respond, couldn't breathe. She tilted her head, grin stretching wider, skin tearing faintly at the seams. "We are unfinished." Her hand lifted, skeletal but strong, pointing toward the typewriter scar still imprinted across my ink-stained fingers. "Write and join us. Refuse and feed her instead." At first, I didn't understand. Then I saw her tilt her face toward the crib. From beneath splintered wood, something stirred, slowly. Too many limbs shifting at once, dragging itself upward with little wet sounds. I stepped back, my shoulder knocking into jars, shattering one to the floor. Liquid spread across the boards, glowing faintly, seeping into cracks. The thing inside the crib rose. It was never human. I won't waste words trying to shape its form clearly. My mind refuses to hold it now. But I knew, without question, it was her child. The house's child. And I was in its room. The thing landed on the nursery floor with a wet, collapsing sound, unfolding two long legs, snapping joints backward in spirals. Its face, God, its face was a blur like the others, yet its mouth gaped deeper, deeper than its head should allow. From it came a shriek so piercing the jars rattled on their shelves, one by one bursting open until the room reeked of copper and rot. The fingers inside spilled across the floor, twitching, dragging themselves toward me like a swarm of pale worms. I bolted. The hallway twisted the second I crossed back through the nursery door. It wasn't straight anymore. The walls curved, funneling me deeper, though my eyes swore I was still heading back toward the stairs. The doors slammed one by one as I passed them, their bangs reverberating like gunshots. Behind me, the monstrous thing shrieked again, its limbs cracking as it moved faster than anything that size should. I didn't look back. I couldn't.
If I saw it fully, I knew I'd never breathe again. The house didn't want me to escape. It wanted me to run, to bleed out my fear, each footstep deeper into its throat. And somehow, impossibly, it worked, because when I finally stopped, it wasn't the foyer waiting for me. It was the basement again. The basement soil flesh pulsed warmly under my shoes. The typewriter sat waiting on its desk, a fresh sheet already rolled, pale and perfect. The blurred figures stood in their circle once more, silent this time, watching. Above, faintly, the child shrieked, closer now, coming down from me. And the typewriter keys moved by themselves, one word printed before my eyes: begin. I wanted to collapse. Fear hollowed me so thin I barely carried weight anymore. But the figures leaned closer, and the typewriter waited, and the child's wet shrieks grew nearer. So I sat, and for the first time, my own hands started to type. The keys clicked under my trembling fingers, not with force, but inevitability. Words spilled one by one, sentences crawling across the page. I didn't know their meaning. I wasn't choosing them. I was transcribing a story. Their story. And I knew with dreadful certainty, if I ever stopped, the thing in the nursery would reach me. So I typed, and typed, and typed. Each slam of my trembling fingers echoed louder than the last, though the typewriter's sound was impossible inside that basement void. The blurred figures loomed closer with every line, their oozing silhouettes flaring at the edges, as if my words gave them shape. The paper curled upward, feeding endlessly, black letters searing across it as though carved by a blade instead of ink. I couldn't stop. Every attempt to pause made the keys stab downward of their own will, snapping at my fingertips until blood slicked them. Above, the child's shrieks reverberated, closer, descending. Its body scraped against walls not built to contain it, and the woman in the rocking chair whispered through my skull, though she wasn't here anymore. Flesh writes what memory binds, stories seal what bodies keep. Finish or be unmade. My vision blurred. The typewriter letters twisted each time I blinked. They weren't English anymore, just black symbols knotting themselves across white sheets. But still, I understood the meaning. It wasn't a story. It was a ledger. Each line recorded a name. Each name was a prisoner inside this house. And now, mine began carving itself onto the page. The blurred figures leaned closer, their faces almost sharpening as my keys struck faster, feeding the ledger. I saw partial visages form, hollow-eyed, gray-skinned, mouths opening wider as though drinking their identity back in. The names stamped onto the next sheet like an obituary list. Families, hikers, forgotten strangers who had all wandered here before me. So many. So very many. And at the very bottom of the page, space remained for one more. My hands twitched, my fingertips bled harder, and though I didn't want to, though it tore against every nerve in my body, the letters clattered across the line. Matthew. I don't remember if I screamed or stopped breathing. It was my name, mine, stitched into the endless ledger of souls devoured by the house. The blurred figures straightened. Their silence cracked all at once into shrieks of approval, hundreds of throats tearing in unison. The house itself shuddered, the walls curved inward, plaster splitting to reveal what lay underneath. Not wood, not brick. Flesh. Warm, trembling flesh, damp with veins like rivers of rot.
The entire house was alive, and I had just fed it my name. The shriek from above grew piercing again as something enormous moved down the stairs. The figures around me parted, bowed. Even in their blurred states, they knew it, worshipped it. I staggered from the desk, the typewriter snapping its keys angrily, demanding I return. But I couldn't move near it again. The child crawled into view. Its limbs cracked bone outward with every step, bending in ways no joints allow. Its skin carried the blur of faces smeared as though across wet glass, but hundreds of them, churning, mouths opening and closing in silent, eternal protest. Its body took space, filling corners it shouldn't have fit. And in its chest, hollow and circular, sat the empty crib, waiting for me. The woman's voice returned inside my skull, fused now with the chanting of the blurred horde. Feed, belong, be hollow. The child opened its mouth wider than the stairwell, its shriek splitting every nail in the basement beams. And then, its blur cleared. For one breathless instant, I saw my own face grafted across its shifting surface. Something broke in me. I ran not toward the stairs, not toward the door, but toward the desk. The typewriter clattered as though anticipating my return, the pager waiting its signature. My hands smashed keys, not forming sentences, but letters jumbled wild. Get me out. The machine hissed, its roller vibrating furiously. Paper cracked apart, revealing not pulp, but skin, raw and red. Letters burned into it like brands instead of ink. A story must end. The blurred figures encircled closer. The child lowered itself, chest cradle spreading. And in that instant, I realized what the machine wanted. Not words, sacrifice.
If stories sealed here were written in flesh, then to end this ledger, it needed blood. My blood. I screamed raw, ripped the page from its jaws and pressed it against my chest. The paper writhed, veins wriggling over my skin, fusing, branding. My name seared downward into a wound, burning through flesh to bone. I collapsed, shrieking to the soil floor, the blurred horde shrieking around me even louder, ecstatic, ravenous. The house began to convulse. Its walls moaned, dust shook loose from above, parts of the ceiling collapsing into wet clumps of meat. The child reared upward, striking beams aside as it lunged for me. I thought I was dead, but instead the house ate itself. The ground buckled open beneath me, void yawning wide where soil had been. The blurred horde toppled screeching into it, their forms shredding into smoke as they fell. The child shrieked one final time, high and deafening, before it too was pulled under, sucked screaming into the black pit that erased the front door earlier. The woman in the rocking chair appeared overhead like smoke across the flesh ceiling, her grin torn ragged, her voice wrought thick. The hollow is never empty, only waiting. She fell inward too, evaporating as her arms clutched at the void. And then it was just me. Clutching a burning sheet fused to my chest, bleeding onto it, the typewriter cracked in half before me. The void beneath threatened to drag me down after everything else. But it stopped. The house collapsed inward around itself, walls folding, roof vanishing, until I was standing, shaking, in an empty clearing, on Ashford Road. The house was gone. I don't know how I made it back to the car. My memory fractures, just staggering, dirt under my fingernails, trees swaying above me unnaturally still. When I collapsed behind the wheel of the Ford, the night sky looked normal. Stars stretched bright, the air smelled clean, but my chest still burned. The sheet fused to my skin has never faded. It doesn't wash away. The letters keep rewriting themselves across me every morning in the mirror. Names I don't know, stories that aren't mine. And every night since, when the lights go out, I hear the typewriter clacking, patient, waiting for me to finish the Hollow House's story. That's why I'm telling you this, because if I stop typing even for one night, I know what will happen. The blurred faces will come back for me. The child will find me again. And if you're reading these words now, you've already seen them forming on the page too late, because the Hollow House is not a place. It is a story. And now, you're part of it.